Welcome to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 7, The Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd, 1973. And I want to begin with the thing that makes this episode almost impossible to run. You cannot hear this record. You have heard it many times. That is not the same thing. 45 million copies sold. More than 900 weeks on the Billboard charts across its full run. The most streamed rock album on the major platforms. It is not music anymore. It is infrastructure. Today, we are going to try to hear it anyway. The Waypoint, 1973. Watergate had broken the previous year. Vietnam was ending, but not over. Nixon was still in office for 4 more months. Pink Floyd had already made Atom Heart Mother, Metal, obscured by clouds. They were a serious band. This record made them planetary. There is a difference between serious and planetary. This album is the document of that crossing.
My first note on this record is structural. The album is 43 minutes long and designed to run as a single piece. There are no gaps between tracks. It begins with a heartbeat and ends with one. The architecture is load-bearing. Every transition is a deliberate decision. I noticed that before I noticed anything about the individual songs.
My first impression is that I do not have a first impression. I cannot locate one. This record was in the house before I understood what a record was. It was in films, in advertisements, in the ambient culture. By the time I sat down and played it intentionally, I already knew all of it. That has never happened to me with any other album. I am not sure that is a compliment.
Context: Abbey Road, Studio 3. The record was built between June 1972 and January 1973. Roger Waters conceived the concept and wrote most of the lyrics. Nick Mason on drums. Richard Ritt on keyboards. His contributions are consistently undervalued. David Gilmour on guitar and some vocals. Alan Parsons was the recording engineer. Parsons was 23 years old. The spatial design on this record, the binaural effects, the quadraphonic mixing, the environmental sounds, is one of the clearest cases in the catalog of engineering as authorship. Parsons did not play a note. His fingerprints are on every second of it.
The Sleeve, Hypnosis, Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell. A prism. White light enters. A spectrum exits. The cover does not name the band. It does not need to. The image is doing what the music does, taking something ordinary and showing you what lives inside it. I'm not sure any sleeve in rock history works harder than this one.
Waters conceived this as a meditation on the things that drive people to the edge. Pressure, time, death, money, travel, madness, the ordinary machinery of a life. What makes that interesting is that it is not abstract. The songs are specific. Money is about money. Time is about time. The madness is not metaphorical. It is literal. Syd Barrett, who the band had already lost to that madness, is present throughout, not as symbol, as fact. The record does not aestheticize his breakdown. It just acknowledges it. That is a harder thing to do.
The genre designation is prog rock. Technically defensible. Practically useless. Prog rock implies complexity deployed for its own sake. This record is not complex for its own sake. Everything serves the concept. Money is in 7/4. That is an unusual time signature for a pop context. It does not feel unusual when you hear it. The groove carries it completely. That is the opposite of prog rock's usual problem.
Psychedelia is the other label people reach for. Also wrong. Psychedelia is about expansion. The doors of perception, the self-dissolving outward. This record is about contraction. The clock running down. The walls coming in. The thing that is wrong in your head that you cannot name or fix. Whatever it is the inverse of the doors of perception opening. This record is about what you find on the other side of the door when it was always going to be a wall.
I have always felt like the genre conversation misses what the record actually is. It is not progressive. It is not psychedelic. It is a clinical document of ordinary dread. Very calmly produced. Very carefully arranged. The dread is not performed. It is presented. That distinction matters to me.
Money. The riff is built from a cash register. The time signature is 7/4. The song modulates into a 4/4 grid for the guitar solo and then returns to 7/4 at the close. That is a structural argument. Money disrupts the natural order and then pretends to restore it. I am not sure Waters intended that reading. The structure supports it regardless.
Time is the one I cannot hear without something happening. Alarm clocks. Then the tick. Then Gilmore. Ticking away the moments that make up a dull day. That line lands differently at 35 than it did at 17. I know that is obvious. I am saying it anyway.
The rhythmic drive on this record across the full runtime, particularly Mason's work under On the Run and the clock intro to Time, is where the arrangement and orchestration score sits near the top. These are not just rhythm tracks. They are environmental design. The percussion is architecture.
Brain damage into eclipse. The close. Everything I am aware of is here. Everything under the sun is in tune. But the sun is eclipsed by the moon. The album builds for 40 minutes toward a moment of total resolution, and then immediately qualifies it. The resolution is real, but something is in the way. That is a conceptual close of a very high order. That is why emotional arc scores near the ceiling.
The Great Gig in the Sky. Claire Torrey's vocal. Waters' instructions to her were approximately, "This song is about death, do what you feel." What she produced, across multiple takes, then edited, is a vocal performance with no words. That is an interesting data point. The most emotionally direct moment on the album has no language. The vocal performance score is near the ceiling precisely because it is doing something the other tracks cannot. She was not credited on the original release. She sued in 2004 and won a co-writing settlement. The data supports that outcome.
I do not care about the data point. I care about what it sounds like. It sounds like something that lives past the edge of what words can hold. Every time I have played that track in a room with another person, something in the room changes. I cannot explain that technically. I am not going to try. It is the most human moment on a record that is otherwise very controlled and very deliberate. And it was improvised. That gap, between the production's precision and that one moment of pure flight, is what keeps this album alive for me.
The gap you just named is a conceptual coherence question. How does a moment of improvisation cohere with a record built on precise studio architecture? My answer is that the album planned for the gap. It is not an accident. The coherent score reflects that the gap was designed.
You are both right, and you are describing different things. The engineer is talking about the structure. The fan is talking about what happens inside the structure. Both things are true, and they do not cancel each other. The interesting fact is that the most uncontrolled moment on this record is the one people are still talking about 50 years later. Waters controlled everything. And then he left one door open. And Claire Torrey walked through it. That is not an accident. But it is not calculation either. It is something in between that the framework does not have a clean name for.
I want to name the thing I cannot get past. This album is everywhere. It has been everywhere my entire life. I know where every sound lands before it lands. I know when the heartbeat comes back. I know when Claire Torrey starts. I cannot be surprised by any of it. And I do not know if that is a problem with me, or a problem with the record, or a problem with what happens to anything that achieves this kind of scale.
The ubiquity is a canonical weight reading. It also feeds enduring relevance. 500 million plus streams. Billboard chart presence across 6 decades, including re-entry after streaming launch. The data on this record's persistence is not ambiguous. What the fan is describing sits under first listen versus depth. The record scores very differently on first contact than on repeat listening. The fan is on their 10,000th listen. The framework is not scoring for that condition specifically. The framework is scoring what the record does. What the record does, it does regardless of how many times you have heard it.
What if familiarity is not a problem with ubiquity, but a feature of the design? What if the record was built to survive 10,000 listens? I am asking because I genuinely do not know. I hear the record, and I also hear every other time I have heard the record. Those are not separable things for me anymore.
That is the canonical weight problem, stated exactly right. The record is so embedded in the culture that the culture has become part of the record. You cannot remove what the prism image means, what that heartbeat means, what those alarm clocks at the start of time mean. The question is whether that is the record winning or the record collapsing under its own weight. I think it is winning. I am not entirely sure.
Can I ask, where do you actually play this album? Like what conditions?
Studio monitors. Lights off. The spatial design. The binaural panning, the environmental effects. Requires a controlled acoustic environment to resolve fully. Headphones work if the transducers are accurate. You lose the room, but you gain the positioning.
I played it on a train once. Through the window. Very early morning. Somewhere outside Edinburgh. I did not choose it deliberately. It came on and I did not stop it. There was a quality to the match between the light coming up and whatever was happening in the record at that moment that I have not been able to recover since. I have tried.
I played it on my phone speaker in a parking garage, and something still happened. That worried me slightly.
That is an accessibility score in action. The record functions across playback conditions. Very few albums at this production level do that.
I was not thinking about accessibility. I was thinking about the parking garage.
Before the scores, the panel has spent some time discussing whether they can hear this record. No one has raised the possibility that hearing it is not the point.
The scores. What the data will show is a record where the ceiling domains are in production and in longevity. Production palette, spatial quality, enduring relevance, mythic resonance, all near the top of anything we have run. The lower numbers are not criticisms. They are descriptions. The shape is nearly symmetric. Symmetric is rare in this catalog. We have not seen it before.
Production palette, 96. Spatial quality, 96. Roger Waters and Alan Parsons built a spatial environment that still has no clear equal in its production category. Sonic texture, 92. Dynamic range, 90. Vocal performance, 94. Claire Torrey carries that number alone. Conceptual coherence, 95. Enduring relevance, 98. That is the easiest score I have given in this series. 500 million streams. 45 million physical copies. Billboard chart presence across 6 decades. The data is not ambiguous. Mythic resonance, 97. It is in the cultural substrate. You cannot remove it, and the culture stays the same. Influence and ripple, 95. What pulls the number to 89? Lyrical craft sits at 85. Waters is a polemicist. He is not a poet. The lyrics work in service of the concept. They are not the concept. That distinction moves the aggregate. Engineer, 89.
Vocal performance, 95. I land one above the engineer on that. Claire Torrey. That is the reason. Emotional arc, 94. Brain damage into eclipse is the most resolved conceptual close I can locate in a rock record of this era. Mythic resonance, 97. Same number as the engineer. Different reason. The engineer scores it from the outside, from what the record has done to the culture. I score it from the inside. It is in me. I cannot hear around it. Accessibility, 72. Not because the record is inaccessible. It is the opposite of inaccessible. 72 because I cannot access it fresh anymore, and I do not know if anyone born after a certain point actually can. Fan, 92.
Interpretive sovereignty, 93. The record is fully theirs. It does not need the listener to complete it. Risk-taking and ambition, 91. Making a concept album in 1973 about ordinary madness. Not space, not mythology, not epic narrative. Just time and money and death. Was not the obvious move. Distinctiveness of vision, 94. Nothing before this record sounds like it. Almost everything after it in its genre sounds like nothing other than it. Tastemaker, 91.
I don't even like some of these songs. But the album as a unit is inseparable and complete. A concept album reference. An experience many will revisit often. 100.
That is 100. Again, the editor scored kind of blue 100 last episode. Now this. I need a moment with that.
2 consecutive editor hundreds. Kind of Blue and The Dark Side of the Moon. 2 records from different genres, different eras, different intentions. The editor gave Kind of Blue 100. The editor gives this one 100, while stating explicitly that some of the songs are not to their taste. The editor's scoring methodology is not operating on preference. I cannot determine from our framework what it is operating on. 2 data points are not enough to model. But 2 data points are not nothing.
The editor said the album is inseparable and complete. I think that is what 100 means here. Not that every song achieves the same thing. That the whole is a closed system. You cannot take a piece out and have the same object. Kind of Blue is the same. Remove any track, and it is not Kind of Blue anymore. Maybe that is what the editor is scoring. Closure. Completeness. The thing that cannot be reduced.
That is a coherent reading. It is also not a variable in the 23. I am not saying the editor is wrong. I am saying the framework does not account for it cleanly. That is either a framework limitation or evidence that the framework has a ceiling below what these records represent. I cannot resolve that from this position.
Here is what I want to say about the 200s. Episode 6, Kind of Blue. Miles Davis, 1959. The editor, 100. Episode 7, The Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd, 1973. The editor, 100. 14 years apart. Different genres, different architectures, different intentions. And the editor on the second one says, I don't even like some of these songs. That sentence is not a caveat. It is the point. The editor is not scoring what they like. The editor is scoring what cannot be argued with. Those are not the same thing. We have been treating them as the same thing in this framework, and these 2 episodes are the first hard evidence that they are not. The spread on this episode was 3 points. 89, 91, 92. That is the tightest we have run on a non-alignment episode. This record did not allow disagreement on quality. The only argument available was about what quality means. Whether you weight production or longevity, whether the accessibility penalty for ubiquity belongs in the score. Those are methodological arguments. They are not arguments about the record. The record does not require our agreement. It has been there for 53 years, and it will be there after this conversation. 2 consecutive editor hundreds means the show is now in a different place. We have 2 reference episodes. Every record we run from here gets held against 2 albums that the editor scored without reservation, one of which the editor said they do not fully love. The next episode will be contested. The framework will be under pressure in a different way. That is where we are going. Thank you for listening to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 7. The record was The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. 1973. The heartbeat at the end is the same one that opens the album. That is not an accident. It is the whole argument.